The fall of three. The courtroom hummed with an unusual energy that morning. It wasn't the tense, breathless anticipation of a verdict, nor the solemn silence often felt in pursuit of justice. No, this was something different. Laughter, arrogance, the brazen confidence of men who believed they were untouchable. Seated comfortably at the defendant's table were three police officers, Daniel Mercer, Scott Harlow, and Ryan Maddox. They leaned back in their chairs with an ease that spoke volumes. They had done this before, many times, and today was no different. As the judge lifted his gavel, his voice echoed through the courtroom. Case dismissed. The sharp crack of the gavel was drowned by cheers from the right side of the courtroom, where a group of uniformed officers celebrated. Daniel clapped Scott on the back. "Another day, another win," he said smugly. Scott chuckled as he stood, adjusting his tie with practiced nonchalance. "They really thought they could bring us down," he said with a smirk. Ryan laughed, shaking his head as if it was all some great joke. "Man," he drawled, "I love this job." For months, the three had been under investigation for racial profiling, excessive force, and planting evidence on innocent black citizens. But as always, their connections ran deep. Witnesses suddenly forgot what they saw, surveillance footage was mysteriously lost, and crucial evidence inexplicably vanished. The whole case fell apart before it ever stood a chance. They stood to leave, smug satisfaction painted on their faces. But just as they turned toward the exit, the double doors of the courtroom swung open. A tall, well-dressed black man strode in. His charcoal gray suit was sharp, his tie perfectly knotted. His beard was trimmed close, and his dark brown eyes seemed to pierce through the walls. Confidence radiated from his every step. The room quieted almost instantly. The judge cleared his throat. "Before we conclude today's session," he announced, "there is an important matter to address." Murmurs spread quickly. The judge continued. "As of this morning, the city has appointed a new chief of police." A ripple of surprise swept through the courtroom. "Please welcome Chief Elijah Cross." Daniel, Scott, and Ryan froze. Their smugness evaporated. Elijah Cross. The name hit them like a punch to the gut. The same man they had arrested years ago on false charges. The same man they had humiliated, taunted, and treated as if he were less than nothing. And now, he was their superior. Chief Cross took slow, deliberate steps to the front of the room. His voice was calm but resolute. "Gentlemen," he said, his gaze steady, "I look forward to working with you." Daniel's mouth went dry. Scott shifted uncomfortably. Ryan clenched his jaw so tightly it ached. The party was over. The beginning of the end. The following morning, Daniel, Scott, and Ryan arrived at the precinct. Their usual swagger was gone. In its place was dread. The entire department was abuzz with the news. Elijah Cross was not a man of empty words. He was already making changes. As they entered the building, officers stood straighter, saluting the new chief as he passed. Cross acknowledged them with a nod, his expression unreadable. He stood in front of the room, hands clasped behind his back, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Mercer, Harlow, Maddox." His tone was firm. The three men flinched. They hesitated before stepping forward. Scott mustered a weak smile. "Chief Cross," he greeted. It's great to have you here." Cross tilted his head slightly, as though considering the words. "Is it?" he asked. Daniel cleared his throat. "Absolutely. We're ready to serve under your leadership." Cross didn't respond. Instead, he placed a thick folder on the table in front of them. "Good," he said quietly. "Let's start with this." They stared at the folder. Slowly, Ryan opened it. Inside were pages upon pages of reports, complaints, affidavits, photos, video transcripts, years of corruption meticulously documented, evidence that had supposedly disappeared. It was all there. Ryan's hands grew clammy. "Chief, listen, save it." Cross's voice was sharp, slicing through Ryan's excuses before they could form. "You've abused your power for far too long." Scott wiped sweat from his brow. "Chief, we were just following orders." Cross's gaze darkened. "No," he replied coldly. "You weren't following the law. You were following your greed, your racism. And that ends today." The room was silent. Some officers exchanged glances, others stared straight ahead. There was no rescue coming for the three men this time. "Effective immediately," Cross said, folding his arms across his chest. "You're suspended. Pending an internal investigation." Daniel's jaw dropped. Suspended? He croaked. Cross nodded. This department will no longer protect criminals in uniform. And you three? You're done. The weight of his words crushed them. The system they had manipulated for years was now turning against them. A reckoning unfolds. 2 weeks passed, and the city was buzzing. Chief Elijah Cross wasn't just talking about change, he was delivering it. Internal affairs uncovered everything. Reports of excessive force, falsified arrests, illegal searches, even theft from evidence lockers. Witnesses who had once been silenced now stepped forward. Some out of courage, others because they finally believed someone was listening. And then came the arrests. Daniel Mercer, Scott Harlow, Ryan Maddox. The same courtroom where they had laughed and celebrated now held them in chains. There were no high fives, no arrogant smiles, no friendly faces in the crowd. Only cameras flashing, protesters watching, and justice waiting. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Karen Alvarez, stood tall as she read the charges. Daniel Mercer, Scott Harlow, Ryan Maddox, she began. You are charged with misconduct, abuse of power, falsifying evidence, theft, and multiple counts of racial discrimination. The judge, no longer under their influence, was stone-faced. How do you plead? Daniel swallowed hard. Not guilty, he muttered. Scott's hands shook as he spoke. This is a setup. Alvarez cut him off. We have video footage, sworn testimony, forensic reports. The truth is clear. The trial moved swiftly. The jury deliberated for barely an hour. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty, the foreman announced. The courtroom erupted. Cheers, tears, applause. Strangers embraced. Journalists scribbled furiously, capturing history in the making. As officers moved in to cuff them, Greg turned, his eyes locking onto Chief Cross. You set us up, he hissed. Cross offered a cold, steady gaze. No, he replied. You set yourselves up. I just let the truth out. Daniel sneered as they were led away. Enjoy it while you can. We'll be back. Cross shook his head slowly. No, you won't. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them. A new era begins. Under Chief Elijah Cross, the department changed. Policies were rewritten. Corruption was rooted out. Community trust, once shattered, began to mend. Officers who believed in justice found their courage renewed. And the city? The city began to believe again. The reign of corruption had ended. And Elijah Cross? He was just getting started.